I need you to sit with an uncomfortable idea for the next 15 minutes. Because it's going to save you more money than any budgeting app you'll ever download. The thing you call playing it safe with your money is, statistically, one of the most expensive habits a human being can have. Not risky, not reckless, safe, comfortable. The thing that feels like the responsible choice is very often the choice quietly draining you the fastest. And almost nobody notices because it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't send you a bill. It just shows up 15 years later as the gap between where you are and where you could have been. So let's take this apart piece by piece, because once you see the mechanism, you'll start spotting it everywhere in your own life. Here's why this matters more than almost anything else I could tell you about money. Every financial mistake you can name, overspending, bad debt, a poor investment, gets talked about constantly. Because it's visible, it has a moment attached to a receipt, a statement, a specific bad day you can point to. Comfort doesn't work that way. Comfort never has a single bad day attached to it. It has 1,000 completely unremarkable days, each one indistinguishable from the last, that quietly add up to a result nobody would have chosen if they'd seen the whole picture at once. That's what makes it more dangerous than an obvious mistake. Not less. You can course correct from a mistake you can see. It's much harder to course correct from a pattern that never once felt like a mistake while it was happening. Let's start with the most obvious version of this, and it's the one almost everyone is guilty of: leaving money sitting somewhere it isn't working, because moving it feels risky. Cash sitting in a low-interest account feels safe because the number on the screen never goes down. But it's not actually safe, it's just quiet. Every single year, inflation is taking a bite out of that money whether you can see it happening or not. A number that never goes down while its actual purchasing power shrinks every year isn't stability. It's a slow leak disguised as stillness. Don't touch it. Don't learn anything new. Feels like safety and function is like a tax. Here's the second version, and this one shows up in careers more than portfolios. Staying in a role you've outgrown because leaving feels riskier than staying. The job that used to stretch you stopped stretching you 2 years ago. You know it. You've known it for a while. But leaving means an unfamiliar interview process, an unfamiliar company, an unfamiliar version of yourself that hasn't proven anything yet in this new environment. So you stay. And staying feels like the safe move because nothing dramatic is happening. Meanwhile, your skills are quietly plateauing while somebody in a less comfortable, more demanding environment is compounding theirs. Comfort here isn't neutral. It's actively costing you the version of your skill set that would exist 5 years from now if you'd left when you first felt the itch. Third version, and this one hides in plain sight. Never renegotiating anything, ever, because asking feels uncomfortable and not asking feels safe. Your rate, your salary, your rent, your supplier costs, whatever it is. The math on this one is almost insulting once you actually calculate it. A single cell renegotiation repeated as a have lower working life of compounds into a genuinely enormous number. Not that any one negotiation is huge, but he's avoiding all of them. Every single one per day that adds up to a staggering amount of money that fails you never even say. The discomfort of one slightly awkward conversation is measured in minutes. The cost of avoiding that conversation every time for years is measured in a completely different order of magnitude. And almost nobody does this math until it's far too late to recover the lost ground. Fourth version. Over-insuring against small risks while completely under-insuring against the big one, which is doing nothing with your time. People will spend hours researching the safest possible place to park a small amount of savings, hours comparing tiny interest rate differences, and then spend 0 hours examining whether their biggest asset, their working years, is actually being deployed anywhere near its potential. You have maybe 40 productive working years in you. If you're lucky, that's the asset that dwarfs every savings account you'll ever open. And it's the one asset most people never audit, because auditing it means confronting the possibility that they've been comfortable instead of intentional. And that's a harder conversation to have with yourself than any spreadsheet. Think about how strange this actually is once you say it out loud. The average person who spends $100 is not comparing this means of to save a few dollars, and they'll spend it an entire day evaluating other skills, their role, or the business model where at least highest of those edges of the thousands of hours they're about to spend working. Small, visible costs get audited constantly because they're easy to see and easy to feel responsible about. Large, invisible costs, the ones buried in years spent underemployed relative to your actual capability, almost never get audited because there's no monthly statement for wasted potential. Nobody sends you a bill for the version of your career you didn't build. That bill just quietly accumulates in the background for decades, uncollected, until you finally notice it all at once, usually much later than you'd like. Let me make this concrete with a scenario, because numbers stick better than concepts. Imagine a household earning a solid, above average income, with a healthy amount sitting in a savings account earning next to nothing. Because moving it felt complicated and the account felt safe exactly as it was. Every year, that household adds a little more to the pile, feels good about the discipline of saving, and never touches the actual placement of the money because touching it means learning something new. And learning something new feels riskier than leaving well enough alone. Run that pattern out for 15 years and the difference between where that money ended up and where it could have ended up, properly deployed the entire time, isn't a rounding error. It's often enough to change what their retirement looks like. Enough to be the difference between working an extra 5 years or not. Nothing about that 15-year stretch felt risky at any single point along the way. Every individual month looked completely fine. That's exactly the trap. Comfort never announces the cost in the moment it's being incurred. It only shows up in the final tally, long after the individual decisions that caused it have been forgotten. Fifth version. And this is the one that ties all the others together, staying loyal to a decision long after the reason for making it has disappeared, simply because changing it would mean admitting the original choice was outdated. Maybe it's a business model that worked 5 years ago and hasn't been questioned since. Maybe it's a spending pattern built around the life circumstance that no longer exists. Maybe it's a plan you committed to publicly and now feel locked into, even though privately you know the numbers have shifted. Comfort, in this version, isn't about avoiding a new risk. It's about avoiding the discomfort of admitting the old plan needs updating. And this is often the most expensive version of all, because it's invisible even to the person living it. They're not choosing comfort consciously, they're just protecting a past decision instead of serving their present numbers, and the two rarely stay aligned for as long as people assume they do. And this sixth version, the quietest of them all, surrounding yourself entirely with people who validate the comfortable choice because their approval feels like confirmation that you're doing the responsible thing. If everyone around you spends the same way, saves the same amount, takes the same level of risk, or avoids the same conversations, the comfortable choice stops feeling like a choice at all. It starts feeling like the obvious, sensible default that only reckless people would question. This is the version that's hardest to catch, because it doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels like agreement. But a room full of people conferring the same comfortable habit isn't evidence that the habit's correct. It's just evidence that the habit's common and correct have never been the same thing when it comes to money. The people who loudly don't left them to, at some point, deliberately defend around others to make them slightly unfulfilled or be removing. Precisely that the overstewage of the brain that never can. Now, why does comfort win so often? Even against people who genuinely know better. Because comfort has one enormous unfair advantage. It's immediately rewarding, and the cost of the wrong choice is delayed, sometimes by years. Your brain is exceptional at weighing immediate rewards and terrible at weighing delayed costs. That's not a character flaw. It's just how the reward system was built long before any of us had bank accounts or careers. So every single time comfort and growth compete for a decision, comfort has a head start that has nothing to do with which option is actually better for you. It just has better marketing to your nervous system. So here's what I want to give you: a way to actually catch this pattern before it costs you another decade. Because awareness alone doesn't fix it. You need a specific test to run. First, run what I call the 10-year test on any decision where comfort is whispering to you. Ask yourself plainly, if I make the comfortable choice here, and I make it consistently for the next 10 years, where does that leave me? Not this month, Not this year. 10 years, compounded. Most comfortable choices look completely reasonable in isolation and completely devastating once you run them out a decade. That gap between how reasonable something looks today and how expensive it looks compounded is exactly where most people get quietly trapped. Second, separate the feeling of the actual math of risk every single time, because they are not the same thing and your gut will lie to you about the difference. Something can feel enormously risky, like negotiating your salary, while the actual downside is small and recoverable. Something can feel completely safe, like leaving money uninvested for 15 years, while the actual downside compounds into a genuinely large number. Your gut is calibrated for physical danger from thousands of years ago, not for modern financial decisions. So stop trusting it as your only input and start checking it against the real numbers. Third, build one small discomfort into your routine on purpose, on a schedule, instead of waiting for life to force it on you. Ask for something you'd normally avoid asking for once a quarter. Have one conversation you've been avoiding once a month. Review one financial decision you made out of comfort, not strategy, every 90 days, and change it if it doesn't hold up. This isn't about becoming a person who loves discomfort. Nobody actually loves it. Fourth, audit your inner circle the same way you'd audit a subscription list, and ask which of your comfortable defaults are actually being reinforced by the people you talk to most. Not to blame them. They're often just running their own comfortable defaults and inviting you along for the ride without either of you noticing. But if every financial conversation you have ends in mutual agreement that things are fine exactly as they are, that agreement is worth questioning at least as hard as any spreadsheet. Find one or two people, even if it's just through what you watch or read, who are visibly doing something less comfortable and more ambitious than what's normal in your current circle. You don't need to copy them. You just need enough exposure to remember that the comfortable default isn't the only option on the table. It's just the loudest one in the room you happen to be standing in. Let me hit a few objections before you go, because I know exactly what's coming in the comments. This sounds like you're telling me to be reckless with money. I'm not. There's a real difference between calculated discomfort, where you've actually run the 10-year test and the math supports the move, and recklessness, where you're just gambling and calling it courage. Everything I described here has math behind it. Reckless decisions usually don't, but some comfort is genuinely fine. Not everything has to be optimized. Also true. And I'm not telling you to negotiate the price of your morning coffee or turn every decision into a spreadsheet. I'm talking about the handful of comfortable defaults, usually somewhere between 3 and 5, that are quietly running your financial life on autopilot and have never once been questioned since you first fell into them. Those are the ones worth the 10-year test. Everything else, let it be comfortable, that's fine. I've been comfortable for years. Is it too late to fix this? No. And here's why the question itself is a comfort trap dressed up as a reasonable concern. The 10-year test works exactly the same whether you're starting today or you started 10 years ago. The only version of this that's actually too late is the one where you never run the test at all, because that's the only path guaranteed to compound the same comfortable defaults for another decade. My friends and family aren't the problem. They just want me to be safe. I believe that. And I'm not suggesting anyone around you has bad intentions, but wanting you to be safe and being calibrated on what actually constitutes safety are two different things, and most people inherited their sense of financial safety from the same untested defaults everyone around them inherited. The people who love you can want the best for you and still, completely unintentionally, be reinforcing a comfortable default that's quietly costing you more than any risk they are worried about protecting you from. So here's what I want you to do the second this video ends. Think of the one comfortable default in your financial life you haven't questioned in years. The one that came to mind almost immediately while you were watching this, because that's usually the honest one. Run the 10-year test on it, right now, out loud if you have to, and if the math doesn't hold up, that's your signal. Not to panic. Not to overhaul your entire life by tomorrow morning, just to make one uncomfortable decision this week that your comfortable self has been avoiding. Comfort will always feel like the safer choice in the moment you're making it. The only way to find out whether it actually is safer is to do the math instead of trusting the feeling, and most people, for their entire financial lives, never do. One last thing before you go. Because I don't want this to be another video you nod along to and then forget by tomorrow afternoon. Screenshot the 6 versions of the comfort treffer in this video, or write them down somewhere. Doesn't matter how, just make them findable. Idle money mistaken for safety. A career you've outgrown mistaken for stability. Conversations you avoid mistaken for good manners. Your working years left unaudited while your savings account gets all the attention. Loyalty to an old decision mistaken for consistency. And an inner circle that quietly agrees with every comfortable default you've ever made mistaken for wisdom. Go through that list once a quarter, not once and never again. Ask honestly which ones are quietly running your life right now without your permission. The people who actually change their financial trajectory aren't the ones who had one dramatic breakthrough moment. They're the ones who caught themselves in this exact pattern. Over and over, small decision after small decision, until the compounding finally started working for them instead of against them. Nobody wakes up one day suddenly wealthy because they had a single burst of courage. They get there the same way they got stuck, through repetition, except the repetition finally started pointing in the other direction. That shift is available to you starting today. And it costs nothing except the willingness to feel a little uncomfortable on purpose, on a schedule, for long enough that the discomfort itself stops being the story and the results quietly become it instead.